So I started Ready, Set, Row in 2015 for a bunch of athletes who wanted to get faster on the erg. They were rowing in my area. And shortly after that summer was very effective. They said that they wanted to race on the water. And long story short, Ready, Set, Row Summer Development Team was born, which is a junior women's only right now racing camp. And we have character building, all terrain skill training as the underbelly of the work that we do. So we are a rowing camp, but these life skills are woven throughout the entire curriculum, and they're a critical and integral part of what we do. And I believe they are the reason that athletes do youth sports, even collegiate sports. But we've made it really salient, and we've integrated the education into the material so thoroughly so that the athletes sort of don't even see it right away until maybe the end. I'll tell you about some feedback if we have time at the end from what the athletes say, but it's really, really amazing, super rewarding. And we have a really different coaching philosophy. So I want to give you guys a little bit more of a deep dive on that, because my parents and some coaches always want to know a little bit about that. So the context for why I do this, and I think Kate could weigh in on this too, is these skills are life skills where we can use the sport to teach them. And not only will they make the athlete faster, take each woman and make her individually faster, and then we put them in boats to make boats go fast, as opposed to getting really fast athletes, putting them in a boat and expecting the boat to go fast. But they're also the skills that they're going to call upon in their immediate future, especially at the junior level, standardized testing, college interview, the application process, recruiting, all that stuff if they want to do that. And they're really critical when they're done with college, right? These are the life skills that they're going to carry with them. And rowing is the medium by which we teach those skills. So that is a really different coaching philosophy than any other racing camp, and something that we're really proud of. I'm just going to mute you guys if you just popped on. So we do this work every day, okay? And so there are other programs. Some people ask me to talk specifically about how we compare to other programs. There are other programs that will have a presentation here and there, like maybe one a week, or they have a couple conversations. And ours is more like fully integrated for the athlete to understand the material, to then learn the tools so that they can go forward and practice all these skills, and then practice them under pressure. So it's not a sit-down lecture where we just talk about SMART goals, for example. This is a full immersion in the sports psych, the performance data, conceptual diagrams I have put together, writing exercises for the athletes to spend the time to self-reflect on all of the stories or their strengths or their struggles, and where they've been resilient and where they've taken the additional steps. And I'll go into why we do that tonight, which is the part that I think people are really excited about. So these are all terrain life skills, and it's done at the day-to-day level, because we're actually trying to shift their mindset around how they approach challenges, how they approach or think about what they do or what they think when they feel the sensations in their body associated with stress, anxiety, fear, right? All of those things are really, really critical. The college attrition rates in our sport are pretty high. Like, there's a lot of, recruited athletes that drop out. And I actually would argue that I don't actually think it's because most of those kids are burnt out physically, right? There are a handful of programs that train quite a bit at the junior level, but for the most part, what I see when I talk to my athletes who are now in college, and they'll tell me about the top recruit that sat down next to them and after the second 10-minute piece put the erg handle down and got up and left and never came back. That is because those athletes didn't have the mental skills to handle the new environment, right? They had been really great in high school, and now they're a tiny fish in a huge pond, and they don't have the perspective, they don't have the tools, they don't have the work in grounding themselves and why they're doing it, right? They're in a state of constant medal hunting, right? Like hunting for medals in races and in sports. And we are trying to shift athletes away from that, right? And I'll talk a little bit about how we do that, but that's the high level sort of conceptual goal that we have, is to remind them that why are they doing this, and keep asking them why. If you haven't read the Cynic book or even watched his TED talk, you should. It's really, really helpful, I think, even for junior athletes to watch that TED talk. They have to understand why they do that. And my why was to figure out my limits, right? It was a relatively innocuous way for me to figure out what I was capable of. And so we're a long-term vision program, right? It isn't just about how many medals we would get at nationals or the immediate medals that you guys would get in that year. This is really important. These skills can be taught, they can be grown and strengthened, and they will atrophy if you don't consistently work them. Okay, so it's just like any other muscle in your body. You have to keep working at those things. And that it's not a one and done. Like, you just don't like learn these concepts and check the box and then never reflect on it. The athletes get the manual that we've put together. They take it home, they take it to college, and they keep reflecting on it. And that is really, really important, right? Because you need to keep practicing it over time. And I think, even right now, the dev team roster is 50% alumni of some sort of mine. So that's really awesome that the athletes are getting it and want more of it, right? And that they see that every time they see more material, they just have evolved and transformed as they've gotten more material. So that's been really awesome. So a little into the details of how this works. So the binder, which is full of self-reflection exercises, are really critical. And for my coaches on there, I'm gonna try to slide in some like actual tangible things you could be doing. The authenticity with self piece is really important, in my opinion, especially for the junior rowers. A lot of college actually too, but especially the junior rowers. That is one of the ways that we believe you can be more brave. We know that bravery is correlated with confidence. And so that's where we're moving. Bravery is a concept that the junior rowers can understand. They also understand that in order to be brave, you have to experience fear. So it shifts the avoidance of something that would be fearful. And I'm using a broad definition of fear to include stress, anxiety, uncertainty, self-doubt, all those things. It shifted away from, I don't want to have that, to, oh, I have that, and which means this is now an opportunity for me to be brave. And that's really important. That's the beginning of the shift. I work really close with Brave Enterprises that studies here, and we've studied all of the Ready, Set, Row programs that I've done. And I can talk about that at the end if any of you guys want the nitty-gritty details about it, but it's really interesting. The rowers in junior women high school age groups show up in my sessions prior to the bravery training that we do at the beginning of camp, statistically lower than their peer group in any other sport, both in perceived and self-reported bravery levels and confidence, which means a high school aged rower female will say she will report that she feels less confident and brave, and she will report that she believes she is less confident or brave than her peers, which is really interesting. In all rowing, not just at Ready, Set, Row, right? Because we've done a bunch of collegiate B1 programs, and even the collegiate women will say the same thing. I have some theories about that. We can talk about it at a different time. But so this is the bravery is the big character strength we focus on with you guys. And it's also the foundation of leadership, right? Self-awareness is really critical as you guys move into your collegiate career, whether it's rowing or not, and knowing yourself and the things you need to work on and the things that you excel at. So a little bit of how we teach this, and particularly for my coaches who are on here who are curious about how you teach this sort of thing or how you start getting into teaching this. The first is that I provide the data, the proof, and the stories about this to the athletes. So in the binder, I actually have conceptual or even scientifically reviewed, peer-reviewed journal article charts to show them sports psych or sports performance data that has been reviewed and published, so that they can see you are not unique. Here's where all these performers here's what they found with all these performers. And that allows the athletes to realize like, oh, it's not just me. All of these athletes, even Olympic athletes, have struggled with some of these things. And I'll talk about what those concepts are, but you want to be able to show them the data and the proof of what you're talking about, and then tell them the stories about other people so they can start relating to you about these concepts. And that's one of the things that all of the RSR coaches will do. We demonstrate all this data for the athletes visually in the binder with these diagrams. And if at the end, if you guys want to see, I can pull up some even on Zoom to show you. But and then we introduce and teach the actual tools, right? So the whole premise is we're going to manage fear, not pretend like you don't have it or avoid it. You're just going to manage it. And we actually introduced 15 different tools and coping mechanisms that they can use when they feel those sensations in their body, which we're intentionally creating through camp so that they can practice what that feels like. And they won't like them all, right? Like they'll look at it and be like, oh, I don't need to use that tool, or that coping mechanism doesn't resonate with me. But the goal is by the end of the camp, they might have found 2 or 3 that they do really like, and and they're helpful to them. And once they identify those, then we practice them through camp. They might try some out and be like, I didn't actually like that one. And then we practice them under pressure as they start narrowing it down to the 2 or 3 that they want that are really working for them. And so that you and coaches, you can get that material like that. Some of them I've made up myself based on experience, but there are plenty of books that talk about all of these. It's even as sort of obvious as like pacing. Pacing is a coping mechanism, right? The problem with pacing is that most junior athletes have no idea how fast they can go. So they're assuming that the pace is as fast as they can go, and they're often incorrect, but you have to show them the data and the proof about why they're incorrect, and they can actually go faster than that. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then once they pick those tools, then we practice them and practice them under pressure. So we make it harder and harder for them to practice those so that they can call upon them quickly and use them in like a real life scenario, right? Because we don't want it just to be sort of an academic exercise where they've picked 2 or 3 that seem like they would work and they don't actually practice them. And that's everything from, exercises or workouts on the erg to seat racing or anything that will create stress, fear, anxiety, uncertainty, self-doubt. And sometimes we'll do that outside of the boat too, so they can practice this outside of our sport. The other thing that I think we do really differently than other programs, and even my coaches have told me that this was really different when they started working with me, is there's specific language that we use. All the parents of the dev team athletes, I send please do not ask the following questions while your athlete is at my camp. And that is really important because we're actually trying to shift their mindset away from the previous way that they were thinking, which is often, that their value or their whether they deserve love depends on how well they perform related to others. And some parents might raise an eyebrow at that, and I have the data to prove that that's what some of the athletes actually think. They really do believe that their value, some of them, is directly correlated to their erg time or their position in a race. And so we're actively trying to shift them away from that. And so when someone asks them a question using the old language or the old metrics, and even social media can do this too, it sort of pulls them back into their old mind state. And so we're actively trying to push them out of that state. The other piece for my coaches and for my parents is as we use that new language and we're supporting them through those hard things that we're asking them to do, you have to build the trust and the relationship with them, right? So we tell all our athletes that we will never ask them to do something we do not think they can do. And that's not what some coaches will do. There is actually value to sometimes having a kid sit down on the erg and just be like, just go and rip it up. And we don't do that often. Like I will tell them the split that they should pull based on the work that I have seen, the data I have seen at camp. And the reason for that is because I need to build the trust with that athlete that I am never going to ask them to do something I don't think they can do. But then I'm going to say, this is going to be very uncomfortable, but you can do it, but it's going to be really hard. And that's different than, I don't know, but go for it, right? Like that's just really hard for them to do that all the time. So that's like a coach technique that we have, and it's not the same at every club, and a lot of coaches don't have that technique, but that's what we use, right? And there's been some really interesting books on this, and even like, you know, NFL football coaches saying, why would you ever destroy an athlete's confidence? It's the most critical piece in the whole picture. So that's what I see is how to build trust between myself and the athletes. And that's how I'm building their confidence, right? I'm asking them to be brave. I'm setting them up with a challenge that is just outside their comfort zone, not radically outside their comfort zone. And so we're saying, you can do hard things, and this will be hard, but you can do it. And that's different than go get them and see what they do, right? Like they often just don't have the confidence in themselves to do that. And then once you've built that trust and that relationship, then you can ask them to take more risk. On the erg is usually what we're talking about in our sport. So once they know, like, I know Holly and Kate and the other coaches are not going to ask me to do something that I just cannot do, then when we say, this is going to be really hard, but I know you can do it. And then they'll be like, okay, right? And that's not the case for everyone. Like I have seen athletes sit down and have lost before, right as I sit down. It's just too much. It's usually not that they don't trust me, but either they have spent years maybe in their previous mindset, and this takes a really long time to shift the longer they've been rowing that way or thinking those thoughts about themselves or their capabilities. And frankly, sometimes we have athletes where the split that I propose that they do, I am even nervous giving it to them. And I'm correct. Like I do believe the athlete can pull that time, but the jump is so large. I'm worried that mentally the athlete will be like, oh no, like you're wrong. There's no way I could hit that time. And so what's really great, and I'm seeing some of my alums on here, I see like Sue on here. Hi, Sue. Is to have an alum who can reach over to the athlete and be like, I know this seems really scary, but she's correct. Just do what she says, right? And so that's really helpful to have the alumni there to say, you know, you can do it. And some of the stats are, you know, we have about 75% of the roster at the dev team will have a PR on their 2K at the end of the people who test. They still have to come in fit, like we're no miracle workers, right? But we don't change fitness dramatically in 3 weeks. Like we can improve their fitness for sure, but you know, we've had an athlete before come in with a 752 and pull a 727. So we did not change their PR by 20 seconds in 3 weeks, right? That's just because she hadn't spent the time to come up with the mental strategy and tools to manage the discomfort that was going to come with that. And so that's why I believe that the program works in terms of the 2K. The other thing we do for my coaches on here and my parents is we actually 2K after lineups are set. So they will do hard erg workouts that help us predict the 2K that they will do before we leave for club nationals or nationals or summer nationals, I think now it's called. So so that, you know, we feel confident that like, yes, this is going to be hard, but you can totally pull this. You pull this, and this, and now you can pull this. And so they know they can do it, but we do it after lineups are selected so that now the athlete's curious about their time, not if I don't hit the time, I won't make the boat, right? Like the boat's set. I don't care about the time. It's just for you. You did all the work. Now you've earned the time. And once you pull the time, by the way, in our sport, no one can take it away from you, right? I'll go to my grave people being like, what's your fastest 2K time? It's not getting faster at this age now. So whatever you hit that's your time. You get to be proud of that, right? And that's what we want people to do, is be curious about the time they will pull rather than fearful that they won't hit the time that I quote unquote expect them to hit. Most of the athletes, when I will ask them before the program about their biggest fear, it's insane how many, well, almost, it's like 75% are in the ballpark of failure. And, you know, a good portion of those are disappointing other people. And it's parents and it's coaches. It's often not themselves. And so that's why it's really important that my coaches don't ask things like, what was your 2K time? Or were you in the boat that won? Or are you in the top lineup? Or all these things that go back to their previous metrics. Because we're actually trying to shift them to all these other metrics and sort of value adds to the sport. So specific language we use to support mindset shift, build the trust relationship, encourage vulnerability and risk. And just for my athletes on here, the feedback that I've gotten from my alums is, and maybe if we have time at the end, some might pipe up and add their thoughts, but it's like I'm shooting a fire hose of new information in their face at camp. And I believe they are correct when they say that. And I'm not going to change it because I only have 3 weeks to tell you everything I know. And so it's just trying to gather and process and then apply under pressure in the time that we have, knowing you're going to have to keep doing this after camp. And the fact that, you know, so many athletes come back again. When I ask them, why do you come back again? Like, you came last summer, and they say, well, I'm a different person now. And so I think differently. You ask me the exact same question, I'll give you a different answer than when you asked me this last year, which is so awesome as they're actively transforming through the work. But it's a really important reminder that, like, these skills will atrophy if you don't actively practice them, right? So we plant those seeds about look for bravery in your life, look for brave people when someone else is being brave, and where can you be brave in the classroom, right? Okay, so big takeaway. We remind them we cannot take away these hard things or strong feelings of self-doubt and fear and all those things. It's not that we're going to make them at the end of camp have no negative thoughts. What we're doing is teaching them the skills to manage it. Okay. And so we don't use the word fearless ever because we don't believe that you are. And I've asked only one athlete my whole time, has she ever been on the erg and thought she couldn't do it? And she said, yes. This is a Harvard senior, like 10 years ago. And though I was so shocked that she said that, I did not say this, but I should have said, well, then pull harder. Like, what do you mean? You should be pulling so hard at some point that you think you can't finish at that pace. And interestingly, if you ask an Olympian, which I've asked several the same question, they will tell you they know they're on target for a good 2K when they get to the 500 meter mark and they think they can't finish at the 500 meter mark, not the third 500, the first 500. So that just tells you, you know, they've shifted sort of the scope there. All right. So here's the sort of nitty gritty that I thought it would be really interesting to tell you guys about. These are some of the sort of secret sauce about what we're doing. The first I talked a little bit about, but this normalized fear, and coaches and parents. If you can do this for your athletes, this is really, really helpful for them. And so they, even though some of them are on the call, you guys don't have a whole lot of role models saying like, oh, I'm scared about this, right? People try to pretend like they're not scared of something. So then someone else will have the impression that they've got it together, or like they're really strong, or they're really brave, or whatever they have. And so what you actually want to do is tell your athletes when you're scared of something. And normalize it, not make them feel shame that they feel it and try to cover it up, pretend like they don't have it or avoid it. So we do that by telling them and explaining and sort of indoctrinating it in them that bravery is a skill. It can be trained, enhanced, and will atrophy without consistent training. And you want bravery, right? Who doesn't want to be more brave in their life? And I'm not talking like jumping into burning buildings to save children. We're talking about just the ability to take an action when feeling fear, uncertainty, or self-doubt. And personal bravery actually is the one we're talking about, not general bravery like running, hoovering, pulling. We also know confidence is correlated with bravery, but what's so cool about it is bravery is under their control. They can actively build how brave they feel all the time. And we go into that in more detail. And if you're really interested in that one specifically, maybe Kate, drop morebrave.com in the chat so people could go to the website. This is the company I work really closely with that actually studies bravery, and they have a ton of data on there for you guys. The second really, really, really important sort of coaching like principle of Ready, Set, Row, I guess, is that performance does not equal performer. And that may seem pretty intuitive to my parents, but like, of course it doesn't. But that is not how most of the athletes come to me. They are identifying their performance as value on the planet. Either that's their erg time or whether they medaled at regionals or whatever the thing is, right? They assume that if they don't do well and medal or win or hit this erg time or get recruited for growing, that they're not worthy. And at an extreme, for some actually will tell me when I define self-worth, and we use a definition of, value on the planet, I will have athletes every year who will tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, their self-worth is 0. Okay, so they are associating their value on the planet with how fast they go. And what we try to explain daily is that is incorrect, that they are absolutely worth love, and we are so pumped that they are there, that we love them, and that their parents love them, and that their coaches at home actually love them. Just sometimes people will say something and use word choices or time it or deliver it in a way that makes it seem less so. And that part is really important to me, that we really pound in there that like you aren't your erg time. Okay, so that's a really important piece. And the coaches, I don't think coaches actually intend that to come across at all. But I'm not sure they know that so many athletes actually do think that, or at times do think that. So the third really critical piece that we focus a ton on it's all about their perception of a bunch of different things. And I made notes here, so I make sure I don't forget anything for you guys. The first critical piece is their perception of a maximum effort or their capability and limits. Okay, so we actually have some really amazing studies done by professional cyclists to support the fact that their maximum physical performance does not equal their perceived maximum physical performance. And once we start explaining this, like sort of light bulbs start going off for the athletes of like, oh, in training, you are actually trying to push out their maximum performance, like their physiological performance, right? And that's why you do these training cycles and all the things that we do to make their body more efficient, stronger, their heart more efficient, everything. In training, you're also, though, trying to move the line that is where they perceive their maximum performance is closer to their actual physical performance. That is the mental training. And you will move it just by training hard. You will move it. But we intentionally move it even more by trying to educate them and name things and get them to really face those things and manage them. And there's really cool studies about that you can look up that talk about how even elite athletes will have a performance that they believe is their maximum perceived performance, and it's not actually what they are fully capable of. And so once even junior athletes understand that even like Olympic and professional athletes have the same challenges they do, then now they don't feel so isolated, and now they're just managing it and moving it and doing the same thing those amazing athletes are doing. So that is a really big lesson for people. And I know Coach Laura actually even said it's her favorite lesson now in her 30s, that she's reminding herself that like what I believe to be my maximum effort isn't actually my physiological effort. And one or two of the erg tests, not erg tests, but erg pieces we do at the dev team actually proves that to them, right? So we have some tricky erg workouts that they've never seen. They're on different screens or use different metrics, or they have some tricks we have a few tricks up our sleeve so that we can get them to give us an actual physiological data point, get the facts on what their performance actually could be without them doing the analysis on what they're supposed to be. And that's how you do that, is starting to try to get real honest data points of where they are in terms of their fitness and power. The second big concept around perception that I think is really important for the athletes to understand, but also the coaches, is the concept around competition. And this is unique, or not unique, but slightly different than, for, in my opinion, for junior women than junior men. So junior women, even at the collegiate level, many have a harder time with the sort of ferocious competition, right? That they almost feel bad trying to beat their teammates. And that is because, I believe, there's a couple of reasons. There's like a lot of cultural, frankly, and societal reasons that I believe that they think that, but also because we've all been focusing on these metrics, these medal hunting metrics, they're focused on winning, not the process or the opportunity to perform. And the example I want to give, it's actually a concept that came from a book, but it's the idea around the surfer. So we introduced this concept of, pretend that you are a surfer and you're sitting on your board out in the ocean and you're waiting for the biggest wave. And so we asked them, like, why are they waiting? And they say, well, they're waiting for the biggest wave. And I was like, well, why would they wait for the biggest wave if the goal was just to win the wave, right? They would take a smaller wave where they knew they could stand up right away and make it to the end and not crash and burn. And the athletes will see that in the surfing analogy, the goal is actually to challenge yourself, to find the biggest challenge where it will actually allow you to find your highest and best performance. It's like the pursuit of excellence through the wave, as opposed to, entering a regatta where you're going to win just so you medal, right? So this concept of your job on our team is actually to go as fast as you can go, to be the wave for the woman next to you, right? To support her, right? This is actually another coping mechanism, is the group effect, but to support her to go as fast as you can go so that it will raise the performance of the people around you. You're not trying to go fast because you're trying to make that person slow. You're trying to go fast because you want everyone to go fast, right? So that's another shift in the mindset around what is your job on the team. There's a Wendy Wilbur, who some of you may know. She works for US Rowing, I believe now, but she had coached at Harvard after I left, and I was talking to her one time because she's such an amazing athlete and had been on the national team for like 10 or so years. And I asked her, but she never made an Olympic 8. She made some world boats and I believe medaled several, but she never made an Olympic 8. And I asked her, I'm so impressed by you that you trained that long and never made an Olympic 8. How did you keep the perspective in that scene? And she said, I just knew that my job was to make all the women around me go as fast as they could go. And I thought, oh my God, that is so amazing. And like, what an unselfish, amazing athlete, right? To recognize that her job was to make sure the US was as fast as it could be, even if that meant she wasn't in the boat, right? She's just driving all the people next to her. If she's pushing to get in the boat, then she's going to make those people who are just a bit faster in the boat that much faster. So we have a culture around this, and we try to explain to the athletes that, if you're on a run and you win, you shouldn't, or you're ahead, but you're really tired, don't drop back and run with someone who's behind you. Finish and then circle back and get the last people, right? As opposed to sort of dropping your game because you feel like that's not supportive. Those athletes won't think that that's supportive. They want you to go as hard as you can go, and then we don't leave any of our players behind. So the third piece around perception is this concept about their training and their preparedness. And this is why we do a lot of the self-reflection that we do, right? Because we're going to have them dig into how they viewed this in the past. In my experience, there are many athletes who, and especially during an academic year, I'm not sure you can totally fault them for this. There's so much going on that they're running to the boathouse and they're doing their practice and they're running to home to do their homework or to a job and all, they have 100 things going on. So they're not actually even all the time thinking about all the training that they've done and therefore how prepared they are. So when you bring them to a situation or a challenge where the coach may very well know, like, we've done all the work, this athlete is prepared. If the athlete walks into that challenge and believes she is ill prepared, it's game over, right? Like, she has to go in having mindfully trained or created some mechanism, and we offer a bunch of ideas for athletes about how to do this, to track it rather than just going through the motions, because they're physiologically prepared, but if they mentally haven't recognized and they have the perception that they are ill prepared, they're going to be in like full anxiety mode, and it's almost impossible for them to get into a flow state like that. There's actually a cool graph we have in the manual to talk about that with the athletes, so they understand what happens. Like, you have to be aware and understand and believe you've done the right training so that you're prepared to sort of go to the line or whatever the challenge is. So that sort of intersects for my coaches with the approach and process, creating some mechanism so that the athletes, even if it's just a moment of gratitude before or after the practice, to recognize like what you're doing, so that they start to just take a minute to recognize all of the hard work that they're doing, that then is going to prepare them to do the hard things you're going to ask them. Because you might have a great training plan and have done all this amazing work, but if the athlete's not been mindful when doing it, then their mind's not ready, right? Like, they're not going to trust themselves going into that situation. And we explain that to the athletes. Like, you may have very well have been physiologically able to hit the 2K you thought you were before you came here, but if you weren't paying attention to all the work you were doing, it's going to feel like you weren't doing enough. And that's really hard, in my opinion. For me, at least, it's really hard to go to the line if I feel like I'm not prepared to do whatever I'm supposed to be doing. So that to create some sort of mindful practice, even if it's just 2 minutes before end of a practice for my coaches, I think would be really helpful, just to have all the athletes recognize what's going on. The second piece around that is the reflection. So this is the past. We spend a lot of time with the athletes trying to think up the stories, potentially the fictional stories that are running through their head. Maybe someone said something to them in the past about their capabilities, or their internal obstacles, right? We have them identify what those are. They name them, right? They write it down and isolate what they are. And then we select a tool that we've introduced to combat or manage that. That is really hard to do during a scholastic year, but if you have an athlete that has, people will call them mental blocks. I don't really like that phrase, but if an athlete comes to you and is like, I have a mental block about this thing, they're going to have to go back and figure out why they have that, right? So those mental blocks are like, they say they're like a soft, cushy couch, really easy to get into and hard to get out of. So they can figure out like what happened, maybe even write the whole story as if they were writing a screenplay, and figure out what the story is. And then you might actually be able to, if you were there, ideally, weigh in on how much of that is actually factual. Okay, so they might have created a story, frankly, in their head that's not accurate, and that you can help them rewrite that a little bit of like, that's not actually what I saw when I watched you do that. The next piece, and these are all sort of linked with, if you have an athlete that has something like that, is explaining to the athletes that they are going to have a variety of performances day to day, right? They're like little scatter plot dots on the performance, with day of the week or date on the x-axis, and then, I don't know, some value for how they performed. And they're not in a straight line, right? What you want to do is, if you had all these data points over time, if you drew a line, right? It's called a least squares regression line. I looked it up. I remember that from calculus or whatever it was. If you drew the line that made the smallest distance between all those points, you just want that line to have a positive, like be going up. You're getting faster. You're going to definitely have data points below that line. And then you're going to have some above. You might have more below than above. And what happens is the athletes have 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 in a row below. And now all they can think about is that they have these 3 below, and they're sort of snowballing themselves and making it even worse and worse and worse. and their line could still very well be positive. Like they're still, right, getting faster, but it's really hard for them to refocus on the line and not just look at those data points. I actually find that concept really helpful to teach high school. I don't think it's too complicated. They totally get it. We draw it on the whiteboard. Um, and they just need to remember, like, it's all about the line. And frankly, as they get faster, the line slope, it gets less, right? It's not as steep. And that's also hard. The kids get really fast in the beginning, and then they're not getting as fast anymore. So you just have to explain the line is not linear, and it will have some like plateaus in there. And then if you want make one huge line, it will be, but the slope won't be as great. So the other thing we do is we show you the data. Okay, so when you have this moment where you're like, I'm not doing well, and they had 2 or 3 bad practices, is we'll show all the data to show actually you're just focusing on this 1 or 2 thing, and 1 or 2 things, or days, or practices, or rows. It could even be on the water rows. When in fact, here's all the data we have. We do this at the dev team with the ergs, are really helpful for this. But if I were coaching scholastically year round, then I would be collecting a ton of data, right? So that to prove to them, they're skeptics for sure. So I proved to them, this is how fast you are. This is where we're going. We had 2 or 3 bad rows. It's fine. We just need to course correct now, right? And that's really important, I think, for coaches that are coaching year round. The other concept that I want to talk about is controlling your communication. So for all my athletes on here, the coaches at the dev team work really hard to think about word choice, the delivery, and the timing of when we say those things to you. So I actually provide, and will provide even more to the coaches this summer, about specific words to not use, and then the words that I would prefer that they use. And we talk a lot about how we communicate that information and when you do that. The timing really comes in. It's more like if someone has a really bad day on the erg, right? The idea being you absolutely can feel these strong emotions of disappointment or regret or whatever you have for a short amount of time. And we, empathize with you, and we know that you feel those. But at a certain point, usually the next day, I give them sort of 24 hours to feel sorry for themselves about that. And now we're going to execute on what we need to do moving forward from that. So we don't pretend like or shame them that they feel strong emotions about those things. And then they need to have them, but then we try to redirect them, right? So that it doesn't derail them off the path that they're on. So I'm just looking at my notes here. Yes. Okay. So they, in my opinion, often seem to feel like they don't have a place to express those worries around everything. But we focus on the rowing topics for them. And so through the self-reflections, we get some insight into that. It gives them the floor, it gives them permission to talk about all those things, or the stresses, which is why I try to communicate all the language asks to the parents. Because, a lot of the stuff that comes back is they just are so terrified to disappoint their parents, or they just want to make their parents really proud. And I know as a parent, you are proud, right? I know that the parents, what they want is they want the best for their children, and for their children to be happy and feel joy, right? And have the opportunities to go on and lead the most fulfilling life. The challenge is that sometimes, and I even find myself doing this already with my 8-year-old daughter, is sometimes we will say something where we think we're helping them achieve that, and they internalize that as, well, mom wants me to, and now they're going to do it for you instead of for themselves. And sometimes that's okay, and sometimes it's not. So we try to help them balance this and do some of the sort of soul searching work on what they want, why they do what they do, and what value does it generate, and what's enough for themselves. And sometimes we have athletes that have a tremendous amount of pressure on them, and sometimes we have athletes who have some and it's just the right amount, and we just help them try to manage that. And so for my coaches, that's just, I'm sure you know this, but it's just something to be aware of, that your athletes have a variety of those pressures on them. When we give them a challenge, we explain that it's built in the bravery mechanism, right? Where we are going to ask them to do something that's just outside their comfort zone. And we call it within mental striking distance, so that they're like, ooh, that sounds like a challenge, but I can do it. As opposed to like, oh God, that sounds terrifying. If it's too far out of their sort of mental capacity to do that challenge, then it's not going to be effective for them. And so that, for my coaches, takes some time to become aware of when that is. And I think it's a skill I have, actually, to read the athletes pretty well about where they are and what they can handle. And don't get me wrong, I've made mistakes before. Like I have given an athlete a 2K time where on paper they totally could have hit that, but the jump was too big, and I made a mistake, and I should have said, the data says you can pull, for example, like a 708, but you've never come close to that. So why don't you pull a 710 today? And that still would have been a huge PR for her. That's what I should have done for one athlete a couple of years ago. It still would have been a great PR for her, and it might have taken a little bit of off the fear, right? A little bit of the edge off the fear for her. And it was too much. It was too big of a jump. And so we all, learn, for that athlete, it was too much for her, but it's not for every athlete. So it's something you sort of have to keep working with. And I'm jealous of all the coaches that get to work with athletes for either the full year or even more than 1 year, because then you really start to get to know them, and this athlete can take this and execute on it, as opposed to when I think the athlete can do this, but she doesn't think she can do it yet. And so then you have to back it off a little, right? Because you don't want to destroy their confidence by going too hard. And then they don't trust you anymore, basically. So the challenge has to be just outside the comfort zone. I see some questions coming in, and I'll do them at the end, unless Kate, you go ahead and interrupt me if there's something I need to answer right now. And by giving them a challenge, you guys, it's just outside their comfort zone, sets them up as best you can as the coach to get into a state of flow, which is amazing if you can set up the environment for them to do that. They can't control that. They can't make themselves get into that even brain state, but man, there's a lot of stuff you can do to create more likelihood that they could get into it. And that's one of them, right? It's got to be a challenge. They have to know, like, oh yeah, this is a good challenge, but they can't be like, I am not prepared to do that. That is way too far outside my comfort zone. And just the language around that, right? It's actually taken from my kids' Montessori school. We'll actually use the phrase, you can do hard things. We don't pretend like it's not going to be hard, or we don't say, oh, you're fine. We just say, like, this is going to be hard, and you can do it. And I'm not going to give you something I don't think you can do, but it's going to be hard. And that sort of puts them in a position where they know that we believe in them, and we care, right? And we've been building trust the whole time, so that then they're willing to take that risk. And that, I think, is really, really, really hard, really important. Don't pretend like it's not scary. I ask all the dev kids when they're sitting on the line for their 2K, who feels fear, and they all raise their hand. And I'm like, first of all, it's amazing that you all know what that is, and it absolutely is what that is. Even if you think you're going to crush it, it's still scary. Like, it's still going to hurt a lot. It doesn't mean it won't hurt just because you hit the time. And we quickly get all of the athletes on board to understand it isn't actually the pain that's the scariest. It is a little scary. It really does hurt. For all my parents who haven't done it before, it does. But the scary piece for all my parents to really, it like breaks my heart a little if I think about my children doing this. The scariest piece is the failure piece of letting someone down, right? And our sport is all about, you're going to do it for each other more than you would do it for yourself. So we put them in boats and we ask them to create this one unit where they're doing it for each other. Then we extract them out of the boats in the winter and we put them on this horrible machine. And now they're doing it by themselves with this monitor in their face. And it's excruciating. And they're ranked against each other and they're competing. And then we pull them off the machine and put them back in boats and expect them to gel again, right? It's the only sport like it. And so it's really important that they recognize there are a lot of things that are scary about it. And so it needs to be normalized, like I said in the beginning, and that vulnerability builds connection within our squad. People ask me, like, why is the team so tight? And I was like, vulnerable team right from the get-go, recognizing that that's the opportunity for growth, right, and connection. And so when we ask them who feels fear and they raise their hand, I'm like, it is brave for you to have recognized this and now you've named it. And then I will say, and don't let it take it away from you. You've done all the work. I know you can hit these times. Now you just have to execute. And they do. And we'll remind them, or I'll say, if I told you tomorrow you had to do a 2K, it would be the most ferociously uncomfortable thing you've ever done in your entire life, more than anything you've ever done physically. But I know that you could hit a time you'd be really proud of. Would you do it? And every athlete says yes. And then I'm like, well, then you're not scared of the pain. You're scared of not hitting the time, right? Don't get me wrong, it's still really uncomfortable, but you're scared of not hitting the time, right? Of the disappointment from yourself, from your coach, from your teammates, whoever, all of the above, probably for most of them. So the shift from fear to curiosity is the last sort of high level like tidbit I wanted to give to parents and mainly coaches. Actually, is my goal is to get them to be curious about what they can hit on the erg instead of terrified they won't hit X time, right? So, and all the things I just outlined is how we do that, or a lot of the things. But there's other things we do. Those are some of the highest level ones. If you can get an athlete to be like, I've worked really hard. I am prepared. I've done all the things Holly asked me to. I've done all these erg workouts. And she says, based on 8 years of doing this, this is the time I can pull. Ooh, I'm curious. I want to see what I can pull. Right. And we'll have more athletes go faster than the time we told them than won't go the time. So that's the shift in the mindset right there of, can you take the challenge and have the athlete ask, well, what if I really go for it? What will happen? What's the time I will hit if I really, really go for it here? As opposed to, oh God, if I really go for it and I don't hit it, then everyone's going to quote unquote know that I'm not very good, right? It's like the imposter syndrome on the erg. And that's the goal, is for them to be curious about their performance and sort of open the door to this whole other realm of their physical performance. And I can't say it enough. I don't have a magic wand. Kate does not have a magic wand. It doesn't happen for every athlete there, but we have a large percentage that it does. And we have a large percentage of people who continue to train and reflect on the materials since I shot them in the face with a fire hose, that they will pull the time or faster within 2 to 3 weeks of camp. And I've always called them and be like, what? How come you didn't pull that time when I was standing there? And then they'll say, it was awesome. I learned all this stuff, but I couldn't process it fast enough. I couldn't take it all in and then apply it for how I work or how I think. And I needed all that time to really put it all together. And so I'm like, great, that's the way it works. And you're going to have to keep doing this as you go. So this, this is just sort of top 10 stuff that I put together to tell you guys, about it. We are really different, right? This is not just a different coaching philosophy, but the methodology and the curriculum we have is not anywhere else, mainly because myself and a handful of other people built it. And we live the curriculum through the camp, right? It's not a lecture, it's not a discussion like at some of our comps, like the other racing camps. They'll have a good discussion about how to set goals. So this is really different. And this is why I interview every athlete that applies, So they get to know me and we start building that trust and make sure that they understand we're not just going to row and like watch movies in the middle of the day. Like we're going to actively work on all of these skills. And so, you know, this is the never-ending process for them for the rest of their life to continue building these character strengths and these life skills. So we're just planting all the seeds, watering as many as we can in the camp, and that leads to this literal transformation where, you know, all of our athletes will say they learned about themselves, you know, they feel more confident. It's just really rewarding, I think, for, you know, Kate's the other coach on here, but for all of us to do this work because it totally transcends the sport. And they leave with the beginning, or at least the understanding of how to build and continue building this new mindset and approach for stress and fear. And rowing such an easy way to practice it, because what's the worst thing that's going to happen? So for my coaches, top 3 takeaways I put together for you. The first, remembering performance does not equal performer. And I know you know this, but they don't know it. So assume that they've forgotten every day and keep reiterating that to them. The second is arm them with the data and awareness to have a more accurate perception of their fitness and capabilities. It doesn't mean you lie to them at all about what they can do, but you show them the facts, right? And you try to be as unemotional. You might have to edit some of the facts, right? If it is really debilitating for them, but you always couch that in, I'm here to support you, and how are we going to move you to where you want to go? Here's the facts of where you are. I've had a friend call this like a warm, demanding approach. Like that, we really do love our athletes a lot. Like we really care about them as people first. And so if you do that, you can be demanding of them, right? You can demand the best in performance and just know when to back off when maybe there's something happening that's like, this is a bigger thing than what we're doing right now. But demanding without the warm piece isn't nearly as effective, in my opinion. And the last piece is the perspective. That they have to have this perspective on the sport. We are just moving a boat from one end to the other and back. And so our, you know, coaching philosophy is based on this is your opportunity to learn all these other things in the process of moving that boat back and forth. But it's also got to be fun. I think going fast is fun, and it can be for the fun for the athletes, but you have to help direct them to like how they find joy in it all, in the process of it. That's where the Love the Fight slogan came from. Like you have to actually love the process of fighting the internal battle in your head when your head says it can't do it anymore and the boat's still going. So for anyone new on here, a bunch of you guys have asked me about this, but readysetrow.com/RSR is where athletes can go to be on our like newsletter for stuff. We also have /coach and /parent so that I can target if there's like a parent talk I'm going to do or a coach talk. So readysetrow.com/RSR for athlete, coach for coach, and parent for parent. That's sort of the presentation I put together. I had a couple of questions that came in and I tried to weave them through, and I can answer some more of those, but I want to see, Kate, do you want to come off mute? It looks like, oh, this came just to me. You don't actually see this. Okay, so let me read it to you guys. Someone wrote, are things outside the comfort zone rowing related, or could they be areas where the girls might have their biggest fears? Absolutely, like talking in front of others. So when we are at the dev team, prior to COVID, we brought in the Bravery coach who's on morebrave.com. Her name's Krista Samaras. I work really closely with her and we're very good friends. She was an amazing lacrosse player, played for the US team for 10 years and won the World Cup for the United States. And she comes in early in the dev team, like the second or third day, as soon as all the athletes are definitely there in case someone has an exam or something. And we do bravery training. It is loud, fun, energetic, embarrassing, totally embarrassing for my alums that are on here. And the whole goal is to start introducing to the athletes what it feels like in your body when you get nervous or when you feel fear. A lot of it is based on some improv theory and work where most people have fear or nervousness around speaking in front of others. Well, in the case of the dev team, none of them know each other for the most part, except for a handful of alumni. So everyone's nervous to talk in front of that big group. And so we bring her in intentionally to start the whole thing off with like a very vulnerable, leading to connection opportunity for them to both, find out what it feels like to be nervous, start introducing some tools, and we actually do exercises to get them to manage them with their body, express those with their body. And it's all the same thing, right? We explain to them what you will feel sitting at the starting line is the same thing you will feel if you're standing behind the curtain to go on to like a debate conversation or debate competition, or to standing behind the curtain before you're going to go speak to 100 people, right? Anything that makes you nervous is actually an opportunity for you to practice managing your body and your brain in that state of discomfort, right? And in rowing, we take all those things and then add in this element of like physical discomfort, and we call that distress tolerance. So like, how can you manage your behavior in a situation where you are super nervous, you are very fearful, you are very stressed out, and have self-doubt and are in extreme discomfort. All of those things are happening when they're doing this sport. And so, we introduce early that maybe you only row for 1 or 2 more years. Maybe you don't row in college, but all of these things you're going to use when you're sitting there and they're passing out the SAT. I don't even know if they still do that anymore, but when I was there, they passed out the standardized test, right? Or when you're sitting in the waiting room at an institution to have your interview, or you're waiting in a waiting room, right, reception area to have your first job interview. All of those things, you're going to feel the same sensations in your body. So we want you to recognize it quickly. We want you to have coping techniques and mechanisms to use right away. And, we do all the other things like the strategies of when this is happening, like what's the routine you're going to follow to get yourself prepared to go into battle, whatever the battle is. Maybe it's the interview. And how do you manage yourselves in all those situations? So absolutely, it is the same, no matter what the discomfort is. Rowing just happens to have this like additional extreme physical discomfort along with it. So, so I have another question that just came in. If you guys put it to all folks too, then Kate can also see it and everyone can see it. So someone asked me, I remember you said that around 75% of the dev team who test, not everyone tests, just giving you the disclaimer. If someone's got like an ache or pain, I'm like, this is not worth it for you to do that right now. I remember you said that around 75% are able to reach the goals of improvement. Does that concern mental and physical, or do the results vary depending on each? So sorry, that statistic is for the number of athletes who test, who hit the goal target 2K that we provide, which results in a PR. There are athletes who won't exactly hit the 2K that we provide, but still results in a PR, because sometimes we're like, I actually think you can go 10 seconds faster than you've ever gone. And maybe it'll go like 8 or 9 seconds faster. So that's a pretty high percentage. I don't know exactly what the percentage are at, the handful of other racing camps there are, but my anecdotal evidence says it is not that high. And we've had athletes who have gone to both Penn AC and Row West, who are big competitors, and then come to us, and both of those athletes did not PR there and then PR'd with us. So it's sort of, I would argue that, especially as you get really fast, those were RAs that did that. They were already quite fast. As you get faster, it's harder, right? It's harder to PR. And your data points might be closer to your line at that time. And so you're going to have to find speed in other ways. It's not just going to be, you just can't pound out the volume all the time. You're going to have to develop some other mechanisms to find some additional speed, or to get yourself to go to a level that you haven't gone before. So those are the questions I see on there. Does anyone else have any live questions you want me to answer? I see so many alums on here. It's so good to see you guys. Does any alum want to pipe up and say anything? Or Kate, did you want to add anything? I see Sue there. Come on, Sue. I see you, girl. Oh, do you film and critique film? Yes, we do. So nuts and bolts, and then Sue, and then you can pipe up if you want to say something. You don't have to though, but you'd be awfully brave if you did. So the day in the life at the camp Then we practice 12 times a week. And we'll do those ergs. And so land practice will take priority over that water practice, even if we have great water, because we really want the ergs, both for the data points and for the athlete to build the confidence on what she can accomplish on the erg. We do mental skills every other day, 60 to 90 minutes in a group setting with the manual, and they go through that. And sometimes they'll have some homework assignments. A handful of them they will turn into their mentor coach. So each coach is assigned to about 10 athletes. But most of them they will keep themselves. They all get turned back to them. So they take them all home, all the reflections home, like their journal home. And then on the days we don't do the mental skills, we do deep stretch yoga. That's usually in the morning after the morning row, one of those two. And then in the afternoon, we have a variety of additional extracurriculars. That includes film review, that is film of the actual athletes at the camp, but also national teams, or even Olympic review or race strategy review, which is always really fun, including coxswain review for the coxswain group work. We do a few strength exercises. Coach Kate leads those. She's here with us now, but she tries to make it really fun. I remember I had to be like a zombie last year chasing around people or something. So we don't do a whole lot of weights. We do body weight, and we'll introduce the form and function of some of the Olympic lifts, mainly so that athletes are familiar with what those look like when they go to college, but also sometimes there's an athlete or two that we can teach something about or reach them about leveraging their body weight more effectively with a barbell than they can feel in the water. It's sometimes hard for athletes to feel that in the water. And then we also build a Google folder for every athlete to serve as their sort of take home recruiting folder. Even if they don't want to row in college, I have them make a recruiting resume, because it's just good practice to make a resume anyway. So they'll make a rowing resume. In the back of the binder, we have about 20 pages that give examples of all of this. So they will create a rowing resume, and we'll get a video clip of the athlete in that folder. So when they leave, they have all that. So if a coach said, show me some video, then I don't have to frantically go find it in my phone of 500 videos of the camp. And then the RAs will do some fun things about once a week or so. It's like field day or scavenger hunt or something like that. And then there's some off time. So and we try to have all that on a schedule for you guys so that you know in advance. So if you need to set up a recruiting call, you can see like, oh, I have 1:30 to 3:30 on this day free, so I'm going to book my call with so and so at that time. So that should give you guys a sense of some of the day in the life. It's a lot, right? They have a pretty packed day. I do not take their phones away, but I have been known to do a cell phone free challenge and encourage cell phones in a basket at the dining hall if there's too much like not communicating going on at mealtime. What role do the coxswains play in this? So mental skills, you guys, your whole job is mental skills. Your whole job is to execute under pressure and manage your emotions and not let the rowers know what emotions you have. A really good coxswain could be totally panicking on the inside and still executing their job, and no one would have any idea that like this gag fell off or something horrible like that. So it's really, really, really important that you guys do this. And we have a coxswain manual. We meet in small group regularly. They do extensive tape review of each other's together, in like a team. All the coxswains get to hear all the coxswains tapes. And then they'll also lead some professional and some tapes we found online that actually have large areas for improvement. So we'll talk through what those are. And we'll do a lot of scenarios with the coxswains. The coxswains are switched regularly and have been seat raced before. So they do everything everyone else does, except for the erg workout. They're in on the erg workouts from the beginning. And that is by design so that I can explain to them and sort of get them up to speed with why we're doing this, psychologically why they're doing this. And so they can start observing the rowers. Because part of their job, right, they're the coach on the water, but also they need to understand all of their rowers and sort of the ins and outs mentally of their rowers. And so that I think is really valuable for them to understand. I explain what I'm going to do, why I'm going to do it, and I tell them what to look for so they can start identifying, ooh, this athlete looks like they're about to whatever, so that they can start noticing that stuff and they don't have to be so reactive. They can be proactive around that. Someone has asked me, what is the assumption as far as repetition of RSR camp in future years as part of their crew participation? Does continued crew excellence call for camp participation? No. So I think the question is asking me, do I require that they come back, or is our performance a function of alumni coming back? So everyone's doing the same training the whole time. And that's why I was nervous that alums would come back. And I was like, I'm going to talk about a lot of the same concepts that you've heard before. And I've had athletes come back for 4 summers. They've come back as RAs later. And every time I've asked that athlete, are you sure? Like, it's a big time commitment, it's expensive. And they said, I'm just different every time. So even though I might hear something and be like, oh yeah, I remember talking about this a year ago, because their experience, they've had so many experiences to date, and they've been practicing some of those mechanisms before, they just now can take 3 more steps on the staircase of the mental toughness ladder, or whatever one that they're working on. Which is really cool to me. It's constantly evolving, right? Like, they just keep improving on those skills. So, if the question is regarding like, will I run it forever? I hope when I'm ready to not run it, I hope someone else will run it. I hope to get someone else up to speed to know how to do this and run it. But to date, RSR gets faster and faster every year. I don't think it's just because of the alums. I think it's just because we're totally grassroots, frankly. I don't coach year round, right? I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. And so people only find out about me from word of mouth, pretty much. And there are a group of, to be totally honest, there are athletes who are medal hunters, not to fault them, but they just assume that they want to go to like someone who may have medaled more times than we did, at nationals. And that's not our top priority. And so for an athlete that is their top priority, they should go there. But if you want to do all this other work, then we're the people that do it. Okay, so someone else asked if fitness levels in the state. Okay. So for those who, and there are many, you guys, I've been talking to a lot of athletes. Let me just answer the specific questions. Nationals right now are to happen in Camden, New Jersey, outside the Philadelphia area. And US Rowing aims, I think they said 60 days, right, Kate, to tell us when they would cancel it, 60 days out. If they cancel it, then my camp will stay at NMH for that additional week and train, and don't worry, I'll come up with something good. I've already asked actually some local clubs because they would come race us if we all got canceled. So the camp will be 4 weeks, unless all camps get canceled, I suppose. And so what I would encourage anyone, if they really want to buy flights, is to buy Southwest, since they don't charge you a change fee if you're worried about flights going up. But 60 days is the word from US Rowing about when they would make that call. So there's a wide spectrum of where people's fitness is from quarantine. And I've talked to some parents and athletes who literally were in New York City and in an apartment with no access to any fitness for months because they actually weren't allowed to leave their apartment, which is just so tragic, just in terms of their sanity, not specifically about rowing. And athletes are sort of all over the map. So what I would encourage you guys to do first, remember that we're all in this same thing together, right? It's not like all this happened to just you or 5 other people. Like, everyone had this. And yes, there's been a variety of access, and kids in Florida or California, maybe where it's sunny all the time, have some opportunities that others don't. What I can tell you guys, I'm really trying to take that into consideration when accepting athletes, recognizing that access and privilege of access is really varied depending on where someone was and what club they were with. And our mission still stands of building all these skills in these women and teaching them all these additional great rowing skills and giving them great rowing practice and a really fun experience and racing experience. And then you also have to remember, you want to remember the idea that fitness is for life, right? You're not, when you're getting yourself back into shape from a big setback like this, and through I actually talked about through this, the pandemic in the beginning. If you can remember, and this is actually Anson Dorrance from UNC Chapel Hill soccer coach said this, if you can remember that fitness is for life and you're not training for this thing, then it can reduce the anxiety surround the training, right? Because training where you're fearfully training is not fun. So I want everyone to be getting back into it because this is how they're taking care of their body, and they love the sport and they want to go faster. I don't want people to be fearful that they're going to be out of shape when they get there, right? So try to keep it in perspective, I would say. All of the endurance things you can do are good. So the running, the biking, the erging, erg more than you do all those other things individually, but those things combined could be more than erging, if that makes sense. So like erg 2 or 3 days a week and do all those other things, or swimming if you have access to that. And yeah, just show some self-compassion about like what the whole last year has been, because it's been really rough. And so we aim to get all of you guys up to where, as far as we can get you with how in good shape you are when you get there, right? So you want to come in as best fitness as you can, keeping that in perspective, and we'll just, have a great time and get you as far as we can get you.
I have something else to add, Holly.
Yeah.
I think especially to keep in mind, and I would say this even if there wasn't the COVID pandemic, but RSR is the ultimate safe space, and the means of that we invest in the athlete's soul, and we also think about that you're only there for 4 weeks, and it's up to the athlete if they want to, what they want to bring back with them and what they want to tell their team and everyone else. So they really get to go there and just focus on them, and they get to be their ultimate self that maybe they haven't had that opportunity to be at home with their other teams. So it's a really, really great opportunity. And so I think now, especially after hearing that question, it's even more special for RSR to be the ultimate safe space for people that aren't where they were maybe going into the pandemic. Their fitness level has changed. So that's a huge thought that makes it even more special for RSR.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and along with that, you guys remember, particularly, I had just had someone ask me about U17, U19. US Rowing decides whether you're U17 or U19 based on your birth year, not the age you are at camp. So if you are 2005 or younger, you are U17. If you are 2004 or earlier, you are U19. Okay. And so that's hard. If, like a sophomore right now who gets bumped into U19, who lost their whole freshman year to row, is in a real that really stinks, right? Because you might feel like totally behind, but now you're getting bumped up to the older junior category depending on when your birth year was, right? So just take some deep breaths, and like we're gonna do our best to support all the athletes to get them where they're back up to speed, and just recognize that this last year has been really hard. And so that, that's just the reality of how US rowing does all this. So I'm hopeful that you guys will just remember to keep all that stuff in perspective, and and not get too fearful about all that. But the fitness piece, do stuff that you love that'll get you fitter as you come in, so that then you can be curious about your 2K, not because Kate or I would be mad at you because you weren't fit, right? So that's what I would encourage you guys. This has to be something you really want to do, and so you're going to get yourself to the place you want to be, so that then you can excel even farther when you get to us. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anyone else have any other questions or want to pipe up and say anything? No. Sue, you want to say how awesome it is?
I still use my mental training, like in one of my ergorats today. I use my three-line mantra from the Brave thing. That's like,
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
I said that to myself just to remind myself, like towards the end of it when it gets hard. And
Yeah.
then also when it's overwhelming, I just tell myself, like, what can I do today, and think about what I can do today to be better. And that just makes it easier to focus on today and go hard in what I'm doing and not be overwhelmed with everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. So sorry on my Facebook and Instagram, maybe you can't see her, but Sue piped up in the Zoom and she basically said, Sue is one of our RAs. She did virtual with us last summer and she did 2019, right? 2019, when she was a U19 athlete, and she's heading to Texas in the fall. And she said that she actually today in her workout used, and I'll tell you a little bit about that for anyone who wants to stay on, and I'm sensitive to the time for you guys, but she used her 3-line mantra from the Brave training today in her workout, and she reminds herself, what can I do today? What can I do today came from a sign that my freshman coach in college gave us. And I made one and put it in my locker at Harvard and wrote, what do I need to do today? And I put that in my locker. And, you know, the camp, you guys, is full of all of the coaches' personal stories, the anecdotes, right? To build that connection, but also like, we thought all the same things that they're thinking when we were their age. It's not like anyone poof is like super tough when they get there, super confident in themselves without doing all the work. And so I had a sign in my locker and I would look at it every day because I was so overwhelmed at Harvard and I was felt so out of place and undeserving of being there and not smart enough and not fast enough and not tall enough and all the things that I had to look at that every day to not like fill out a transfer application. Frankly, I basically had to say, all you need to do today, Holly, is think about what you have to do right now. Because if I thought about the thing I was supposed to do the next day, and that literally includes staying on the team, by the way, for the first 2 years in college, right? The only reason I didn't quit rowing in my first 2 years of college is because I shook my high school coach's hand and said, I will not quit for at least 2 years if you endorse me to the Harvard coach, which he did. And I was totally miserable for the first 2 years, in all honesty. There were other things going on. I explained all this at camp, outside of rowing, that I didn't know, and I wasn't seeing a therapist and all these things to sort of reflect on, but it was really hard. It is really hard to row in college. And so I needed that sign to be like, right now, all I had to do is control what is happening to me right this second. Because if I think about next week, I'm gonna be like, not doing that. And then the 3-line mantra comes from the Brave training. We build a 7-line pitch. It's called a 7-line Brave pitch. It's on the More Brave site. If you go there, it's something that Krista developed that she's been working for over a decade with junior female lacrosse athletes, where it basically tells your story, right? So you say your name, a year of significance, a place of significance. You do all of the work in the session to identify 3 I am statements that tell your story of who you are. And then you identify a B statement of something you want to be more of, right? So mine is Holly Austin, 1999, North Carolina. I am offense, I am loyal, I care. And then it's B, the hunter. And so all the athletes will come up with that in this like 90-minute training session, and they'll iterate on it, right? But they write it down. We make a big visual board that they take home. And all these things are proven things to help keep reiterating these things to them in their head. And we do really fun exercises where the whole team's shouting these things back at them in a big circle, like really fun stuff that in our sport in rowing, you just don't get to do it. Sometimes you do it in team sports, but rowers aren't very loud. So it's really fun to see them sort of get loose and do all that stuff. What do I recommend we do for the rest of the summer outside of the 4 weeks? Oh, well, it depends how old you are, right? If you are an approaching senior and you feel strongly that you don't have the time that you need if you've identified the school you would like to attend, not the rowing program you would like to row at, but if you've identified the school you'd like to attend, and you're interested in being in reaching out to those coaches and you need to be faster, then you're going to have to train to do that. And I would say erging is the best way to get better at erging, but I'd also say that, you know, your sanity is just as important. So you're going to have to do some other things. I used to run a lot or like swim a lot just you know, your heart doesn't know the difference, do something fitness-based that way. But also I like my athletes to take some time off, remembering that fitness is for life, right? So you don't have to train on the erg, but if your family's going to go hiking, you carry the backpack with all the water, right? Like load yourself up and none of those people have to carry anything. Like do those kinds of things where you can make yourself stronger, or do things outside your comfort zone, like maybe learn a new sport, where you're making your brain think a different way, or you're reducing your ego to play a sport that you're not going to be very good at, right? Like do all of those things to make yourself a tougher, better, fitter, more versatile, agile athlete. That is what I would recommend. Sanity is necessary. So you have to think about, like, do you have the infrastructure and capacity to keep training by yourself if you were going to do that after the 4 weeks. I don't see any other questions on here, you guys. So I am thrilled to have had so many people through here. I hope the people I don't know on here will consider joining us or applying to join us. It's on Regatta Central. The application is on there. For those athletes who are really interested in this, but maybe the dev team wouldn't work out, it's mid-June to mid-July, basically June 18th to July 18th. We are going to run a 6-week virtual summer program. So last summer, in January, when I thought this was going to go bad because I have a viral expert friend who was studying it all. And I basically said, Holly, this is going to go down. Your camp's totally going to get canceled. In January, Kate and myself and a bunch of other people started building the dev team virtually. And we pulled that off. I assumed all the summer camps, we are the only summer camp that has a plan B in place in case, I don't know, the variants get really bad or something happens and summer camps get canceled. We had 83 athletes through it last summer. 26 of those athletes actually did full 12 weeks, which was amazing. I had no idea they were going to do that. The virtual program is 6 weeks long, and all of the athletes on the roster will get priority to roll into that if summer camps get canceled, and then we'll open up however many extra ones that we have for athletes to do that. 6 weeks starts June 20th and goes through the end of July. So those athletes would have August to rest, recover, spend time with family, and do normal fitness things, not necessarily erg work. And that includes, you know, live Zoom workouts, one-on-one coaching, technical coaching, mentors, the mental skills, and small group discussions, along with movies that I made to music. It's sort of embarrassing, but I thought it was kind of fun, with several of the workouts that you guys could listen to us coaxing you through the workout as the movie was playing, as you were urging. So pretty cool program. And that is open for anyone who even doesn't want to do the dev team. They could just do that. Anyway, so I'm so glad to have all you guys. It's been so awesome. I think there actually is one question here. How do I do this? Oh, someone's asking me about if you have to run. I totally get it, but it says I've been out the past few months because of arthritis. Tips for coming back from an injury. So if you recall, this is from one of my former athletes. Go back to your binder. In your binder, there is a coping mechanism called the workaround effect, which is basically the idea that when you are injured or when you have a setback like an injury, it forces you to create, imagine like a big construction cone in your way. It forces you to sort of go around the cone and come up with an alternative way to get where you want to go, right? That's the workaround effect. And there were examples of that in the binder of people who had an injury, or maybe even in an extreme case, like lost a limb or like lost some sort of ability, that then they had to figure out how to do what they wanted to do in a different way. And so they tapped these other resources they had to go around. So what does that mean? That means if you have arthritis and you haven't been able to erg, in the time you have the arthritis and you can't erg, you have to figure out how you're going to get faster without the erg, because you can't use the erg. So in that time, when you have that injury, you need to be, you can still do fitness, right? If you're biking up a storm. And if everyone's doing 5x2K on the erg, then you're doing 8 times 8 minutes on the bike, right? Not 5. So that you get off knowing in your heart, you have the perception that you did enough or more work, right? You're building up your mental skills or some other tool for your game, your mental game, and making sure that you don't actually decrease your mental game by like reiterating negative self-talk. There's a whole section in the binder about self-talk. You can also up your nutrition, right? If you can't train on the erg, how could you get faster? Well, you could get faster by making sure you are doing the best fueling for your body possible. Okay. So there's a bunch of things you can do, but you have to do something. You can't just take one piece out and not put something else in. So if one piece comes out and it's erging, put something else in there, something else that is under your control that will make you faster. Maybe you dedicate to drinking this gargantuan water bottle every day that I just got myself, or maybe you commit to, sleeping 8 hours a night or whatever your thing is going to be. But you got to figure out how you're going to get yourself faster, or else when you come back, you will feel like you're slower, right? You're just going to have the perception that you're slower. You might not be, but you're going to have the perception that you are. Okay, awesome, you guys. Someone asked if there's free time. Yes, there is free time allocated after every meal, at least an hour. And then there are like small 2.5 hour blocks occasionally. Sometimes we'll open coaches for office hours. So like it's free time, but you could come down to the ergs to, talk about some technical things, or if say you've been hearing some technical comments on the water and you want to understand that better, then we'll say it's free time, but one coach will be down there if you want to come down for office hours. So I hope that was really helpful for you guys. My email is Holly at readysetrow.com. I am gonna put it in here if you don't have it. We still have athletes applying, which is awesome. So please do that if you're interested in coming. And we're actively looking for U17 coxswains. So if you are a 2005 or younger, we want you. We have some great U17 rowers, and I need some more coxswains. So so great to see all you guys. And please reach out to me if you have any questions. Kate, you got anything left? Thanks for joining.
No, yeah, this was great, Holly. And look forward to meeting new people this summer and seeing old ones. And excited to get back out and into the rowing world after we've had the opportunity of the pandemic. So
I know, awesome. All right, you guys, please reach out to me if you have any questions. It was great to see you, and have a great weekend coming up.